Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, Monday, start of a new week, June 9th, 2025. Today on the discussion, we are talking about the Eastern Pacific still. That is where most of our activity is right now, because we now have officially our first hurricane of the season in the Pacific with Tropical Storm Barbara, which formed yesterday. And obviously, we are tracking Tropical Storm Cosme as well, which also is close to becoming a hurricane. So let's go over what is going on in the Eastern Pacific right now. Obviously, starting off with Hurricane Barbara, the first hurricane of the season in the Eastern Pacific. Maximum sustained winds right now are at 75 miles an hour. Minimum central pressure is at 991 millibars. If you're tracking it, it is located at 18.2 north and 106.8 west, and it is moving northwest away from the Mexican coastline, as I've mentioned and as we've been talking about right now at 10 miles per hour. And we have Tropical Storm Cosme, also near hurricane strength right now. Maximum sustained winds are at 70 miles an hour and minimum central pressure at 992 millibars. And if you are tracking it, again, it's located at 15 north and 113.9 west, and it is moving also to the northwest at 9 miles per hour. Both of these storms are moving northwest and not posing any threat to Mexico. And then we obviously have more development behind these two systems. We're not done in the Eastern Pacific yet. The National Hurricane Center is also giving an additional area of potential formation within the next week, up to a 60% chance at that. And I'll show you the models in a little bit, namely the GFS. It looks like, once again, we will probably not be done with development in the Eastern Pacific. Certainly, quite an active start to the Eastern Pacific, especially compared to the last several years. And it looks like this string of activity, this train of storms, will probably continue for at least the short-term future. Here's a satellite look right now at the Eastern Pacific, and you can see where our activity is with Barbara right off the coast of Mexico here, and Cosme right near it. And again, both of these storms are going to move off to the west northwest. Mainly in terms of impacts to Mexico, there really will not be much. But obviously, if you are along the coast, keep a lookout for rip currents, high surf, and of course, maybe some occasional showers and outer bands. But Barbara is starting to move off to the northwest, so even those are starting to move away from the coastline. And you could also see, let's really quickly zoom in on Barbara, a close-up shot. I think Barbara is probably peaked in its intensity right now. It did look quite pretty good yesterday morning when it did form, and yesterday seems to be a trend I've noticed, at least with Alvin. Alvin ramped up pretty quickly the day it formed, and then the next few days after, it then started to choke a little bit, and obviously then weekend after. Barbara definitely not the most organized system. In fact, you can see convective bands that do try to form and then they end up dying off. And Barbara does have a pretty ragged look right now. I think there is quite a bit of dry air that is choking off this storm. So it did become a hurricane, but I do think it is probably peaking in intensity. And if you actually, let's take a look at the National Hurricane Forecast track. They seem to agree with me. They expect Barbara to weaken from here on out. And by tomorrow afternoon already, the National Hurricane Center forecasts that Barbara will weaken into a remnant low. It will not even be a tropical or a fully actual tropical system anymore, because now it is going to move to the west northwest here, and water temperatures are definitely much cooler than normal, especially once you get closer to the Baja Peninsula, and that'll definitely help in choking off the system. But it did nonetheless become our first hurricane of the season in the Eastern Pacific. And then Cosme, on the other hand, also close to being a hurricane, but I actually I am skeptical about whether or not it will do so. And you can even see here with Cosme 2 also looking pretty ragged, dealing with a little bit of wind shear just by the look of These cloud tops, they're also kind of sporadic. It's definitely not the look of a very organized storm that is developing and is on its way to becoming a hurricane. It still could, but I'm not really sure if this is necessarily the look for a storm that will strengthen to a hurricane. It looks like both Barbara and Cosme are starting to move into those cooler waters, and they're definitely taking in drier air that is to the northwest. And I will see if Cosme becomes a hurricane. Right now it is at 70 miles an hour, so it still might. And the National Hurricane Center as well forecasts that Cosme will still strengthen to a hurricane. So we'll see within the next several hours if it does actually do so. But then it's going to move once again into cooler waters here just to the north of it. And by tomorrow night, the National Hurricane Center expects Cosme to dissipate by tomorrow night or early Wednesday. So so once we get towards midweek, we won't have to worry about Barbara and Cosme any longer. And there's really not too much to worry about with them anyways right now, since once again they are both not any major threats to land at this moment, which is a good thing. Really quickly, here's a satellite image of things in the Atlantic, and as again, the Atlantic remains quiet over the next week. Nothing in terms of development really eye-popping, and you could certainly see why that is. Just take a look at all these strong upper level winds, which are very prevalent across the tropical Atlantic right now. Very strong wind shear in the MDR, in the Caribbean. You can even see it off the southeast coast too. And then obviously we have our Saharan air outbreaks, which come off the coast of Africa, especially this time of year, because we tend to have stronger trades out in the Atlantic this time around. And we get those Saharan air outbreaks, and that helps keep a lid on development, at least early on in the season for right now. But even if we do not get development, we still have these tropical waves out here in the MDR, which we do track. In fact, I think this is a tropical wave that is right close to just off the northern coast of South America and approaching the southern Lesser Antilles here. And in fact, I actually have the ocean analysis map from the National Hurricane Center. And yeah, that is a tropical wave that is approaching the Lesser Antilles right now. And there are actually a few tropical waves out in the Atlantic. Obviously, though, none of them are expected to develop. Once again, just taking a look at the satellite, you could see lots of strong wind shear, lots of strong upper level winds. That's not favorable. There's also lots of dry air. And I mean, just taking a look at the upper level winds here, you could see very strong, blowing across right through the MDR. And we all know that strong upper level winds are not favorable for development. And virtually the entire Atlantic, you just see, especially in the very upper levels, all of these very strong wind barbs here. Winds definitely 30, 40, 50 knots, at least judging by these wind bars in the upper levels. So very strong wind shear, and that'll certainly help keep a tap on any development for the foreseeable future, at least for right now, which is a good thing, obviously. And it is also typical of this time of the year anyways, the tropical Atlantic. We are still easing into the summer pattern and the typical tropical pattern we see in the Atlantic. So as for now, things are still very unfavorable, but we're going to watch over the next several weeks as that'll probably change. And especially as we get into July and August, you'll really start to see how things will ramp up. But obviously, for now, things are nice and quiet. And I'll show you with the GFS in just a moment. Things will be nice and quiet, at least in the Atlantic. But in the Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, let's really quickly show you the GFS. Barbara and Cosme within the next 2 or 3 days as they move off to the northwest. Once again, staying away from any sort of coastal areas, so that is a good thing. Eventually, both Barbara and Cosme die out. Their energies do kind of interact a little bit. Very interestingly enough, you kind of see a Fujiwara effect go on where the energy of Barbara kind of seems to rotate into the energy of Cosme, but then they both dissipate. And then beyond that, taking it out to the next week, nothing else except you do see more vorticity here, once again closer towards Central America. And obviously, we do have that other area of interest in the Eastern Pacific. And you can see as we get towards around the week time frame, more energy does try to bundle with the vorticity. In fact, you could already see a low pressure on the GFS form here, as you can see with these isobars in here, maybe a low pressure or a closed surface low that is already beginning to form. So development is probably going to continue in the Eastern Pacific, at least for the next week. Obviously, we do have that area of interest in the Eastern Pacific, and we'll monitor and see if it does indeed bear any watching, especially in terms of any interest in Mexico. But the Eastern Pacific will probably stay active and prime for development at least over the next week or so. And then in the Atlantic, really quickly, before we end off, virtually nothing over the next week. Very strong high pressure. And this is this is really why we're not getting any development. I should mention this because I have been talking about over the last week how we do have a Central American gyre pattern here over the Western Hemisphere in the Western Caribbean, over Central America. That's why it's called a Central American gyre pattern, where we generally have lots of vorticity and broad low pressure and turning of the atmosphere over Central America. And it definitely does help, especially this time of year, with tropical development in the Eastern Pacific, which we are seeing right now, manifestly with Barbara and Cosme, and probably with another system that might form here within the next week. And as we all know, especially if you've been tracking for many years, you know that these Central American gyre setups can help with development in the Atlantic too. But as you could see, just look at once we get to a week out, notice how strong the high pressure is out here, the Bermuda Azores high. These isobars, lines of equal pressure, extend literally all the way into Texas. And you can even see that drawing by the wind bars here. Very strong and brisk trades stretching out all the way through the Caribbean. So pretty much that is keeping all of the moisture locked in Central America, and the ridge is keeping things very nice and toasty and very hot over the southeast. And none of the moisture that is over Central America is able to lift northward and potentially try to organize in the Gulf, even though the Caribbean and Gulf, and I've showed you with sea surface temperature anomalies before, in fact, not long ago. And if you're keeping track of the sea surface temperatures in the Caribbean and Gulf, they are definitely more than favorable for tropical development. But the ridge is very strong right now, and that's keeping all this moisture and this vorticity over Central America. And until that ridge goes away, it looks like that's probably going to keep activity at least over the next week pretty quiet. And then obviously whatever GFS fantasy hurricanes that have been spinning up for the last week of, if not longer as well, those are not going to happen. And I think that's pretty obvious by now. So really not much to track, at least for now, in the Atlantic. All of our main focus of activity, at least tropics wise, is currently in the Eastern Pacific, and all of that is out to sea and not impacting any land. So for now, things nice and quiet. Obviously, watch the tropics because things can change. It is hurricane season now, and as I always say, luck favors the prepared. Never take your eyes off the tropics. But at least over the next week, once again, things look nice and quiet, at least for land impacts. With that being said, I'm going to end off today's video. One hurricane down in the Eastern Pacific, and the time continues to tick till we get our first storm in the Atlantic. But once again, at least over the next week, looks like that's probably not going to happen. If you did enjoy this video, I once again, I always say it every video, but I really encourage you. I really hope you do it. Like, comment, subscribe, especially if you like videos like this with tropical weather information, especially if you are a tropical enthusiast like me. My channel is very much oriented to everybody that are tropical enthusiasts. And we are enthusiasts that like to track hurricanes in the tropics, not out of course, the want to see destruction, but Hurricanes are a very interesting and fascinating phenomenon, and they are very exciting in a way to track. And I'm pretty sure there are lots of tropical enthusiasts out there that are interested. So if you do find this content interesting and informative and adds to your knowledge about tropics, I really would also appreciate if you go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell, because I do upload these videos on a daily basis. So that means tomorrow I will see you back here with another video. So if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can get it the moment I upload. So enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. Once again, I will see you back here tomorrow.